Hey everybody, I'm Dan Murrell, and I'm here with my review of 2019's version of Aladdin, the latest live-action remake from Disney of one of their classic animated films. Now, I'd hoped to review this movie with Roth Cornett, but unfortunately she couldn't make the screening last night, so you're stuck with me on this one. But I hope you enjoy it, as I mostly sort of enjoyed this movie. Now, this is the second live-action Disney remake to hit theaters this year after Dumbo, which came out earlier. This one is directed by Guy Ritchie, reimagining the classic from the early 90s. The new cast includes Mina Massoud as Aladdin, Naomi Scott as Jasmine, Marwan Kenzari as the evil Grand Vizier Jafar, and of course, Will Smith as the genie, taking over the role that Robin Williams basically immortalized in animation history. And so much about this movie, because it is not just a reimagining, but a remake of the original classic Aladdin movie, has centered around Will Smith and the genie because it was so integral to the success of that film. This movie mainly works in the degree that it does because Will Smith actually works as the genie. As a matter of fact, I think that Disney did him a huge disservice with the marketing of this film. The parts that they've shown of him as the genie aren't anywhere near the best parts that he has in the movie. We all knew that Will Smith was a movie star. We all knew that he was very charismatic. The question was, did he have the charisma to carry off this role to the degree that the movie requires him to? I think he did. I think he set himself apart from Robin Williams. Obviously, that role will always live under the shadow of Robin Williams. But I think Disney got the casting right on Will Smith. They needed somebody with the charisma and the personality to separate himself and move out from under that shadow. And I think he succeeded in this movie. The genie works, so largely, just like the original, the movie mostly works. I say mostly because the middle chunk of the movie is the part that worked for me the most. The first 15, 20 minutes were a little tough for me to get into, and that's always the question of, was it tough for me to get into because the movie gets off to a bit of a slow start, or was it tough for me to get into because I'm one of those people that knows the original movie by heart, and it's always a little weird to see another version of something you already know, but there are slight tweaks and slight differences, somebody else saying the words. That might be why it took me a little while to get into this film. But starting at about the time Aladdin enters the Cave of Wonders, I really jumped on board with this movie, largely, again, because of the Will Smith material, and also because the casting in this film works pretty well. Now, one of the main cast members that some people have had some questions about is Jafar and Marwan Kenzari's performance as him, because the character himself is younger and a different vibe, a different energy than we saw in the animated film. And I would say that Jafar in the film mostly worked for me. They play that character differently. He's not quite as cackling and mustache twisting as the Jafar in the animated film works. And I think that performance works for this film until you get to the end, when the requirements of the story, and if you don't know the story, I won't spoil anything, although everyone pretty much does, requires Jafar to go big. That's where I felt that this portrayal of Jafar struggled a little bit, but I actually like the fact that they scale him down. They make him a little more sinister, a little more conniving, a little more menacing, less overtly evil. That's a change from the original movie that I think works for this film. The visual style I also thought was really good. There are some light Guy Ritchie touches as far as the speed shifting and the slow motion, but there's also some really good design work that was put into this film. The musical numbers largely I thought were designed really well. Will Smith on a performance level pulls off A Friend Like Me, but I also think that the film's design team did a great job on that number and others in the film. There are some extra dance numbers that are added that I think work both in the context of the film and from a design standpoint. The screenplay is credited to John August and Guy Ritchie. There are a lot of additions and changes to the film. This movie runs about a little over 2 hours, about 30, 40 minutes longer than the original animated film. So of course there are gonna be some things that are changed. But I also think that whether people know this or not, because of the way that guild rules work around animation, the original screenplay writers for the 1991 animated film, Ron Clements, John Musker, Ted Elliott, and Terry Rossio, are not credited for their work. And I think that they should be credited next to John August and Guy Ritchie, because a lot of the screenplay large chunks of the screenplay are verbatim, are word for word from the film. And just because guild rules are different, I don't think that means that the work done by the screenplay writers in the first film and the long list of people who worked at Disney on the story for that film should go uncredited as well. So it was a little disappointing to see only John August and Guy Ritchie getting credit for the screenplay when it does rely heavily on the original Aladdin screenplay. When you're talking about this movie versus the original, of course there are going to be comparisons, but you also have to try to separate what you know and judge it on its own. And where I initially and really ultimately landed was that I think that this film riffs enough on the original to not be a complete replica, but it also relies on it enough to not be a reinvention. It splits the difference in a way that largely works for the movie. And a lot of that, again, has to do with Will Smith, the genie, because the genie carries so much, particularly in the middle of the movie. They really came up with good material for him, as well as his natural charisma. That carries a lot of it. I thought Mina Massoud and Naomi Scott were both strong in their roles as Aladdin and Jasmine. They didn't seem to just be going through the paces or replicating what the animated characters from the original film did. I also enjoyed their performances. There actually aren't any performances I could point to in this movie other than some minor issues with Marwan Kenzari and how Jafar went toward the end of the film that I have a lot of issues with. There were a couple of things that I didn't quite think worked in the film. Jasmine gets a lot more to do in this movie than she did in the animated film. And I think that there are some choices made with her character that really improve it in a good way. She gets more agency as a person, more agency as a woman. And she was already one of the Disney princesses that probably was the least dated as far as looking back at how they're portrayed in the original films. There is one moment with Jasmine in the last third of the movie where she makes a critical decision that echoes a sentiment that is reflected in a new song added to the film that comes earlier in the film that I felt was placed really perfectly in the movie. There's then a reprise of that song in a much bigger way that's placed late in the film that I actually felt was unmotivated in the sense that she was taking actions that in and of themselves could be viewed as independent, as strong, as her taking control of her own destiny. And I felt that the placement of the song really stopped the action in its point, in its tracks, and was really a character singing about doing something and then doing something where I think the act of doing it was more than enough for the audience to understand. And it was one of the only times that I felt that Disney was actually trying to make an overt statement with a choice for one of those characters, as opposed to allowing it to flow organically. If you look at what Disney's done, particularly in the last 5 years, with female characters in their films, with characters like Moana, with Rey, with Jyn Erso, with so many of the improvements I think they made to Jasmine's character in this film, they really have done a great job of portraying strong and independent female characters in their movies. Jasmine's song in this movie feels a little bit like them either not giving their audience enough credit to recognize that Jasmine has a great strength within her that has been bolstered by this new story, or maybe like a victory lap. Like they feel like this is them taking a bit of planting a flag a little bit. It's not the sentiment. I agree with the sentiment, and I think that they should continue to build on the work that they've done. This particular song felt a little unmotivated to me, and really was my biggest qualm with the third act of the film, along with the fact that the movie does lead to some conclusions that may or may not jibe with the reality of certain situations, and I know it's stupid to say that in an animated film, but there are some choices made that I think were really just adding a hat on top of things that had already been established, that felt like a little bit like overkill. But that's to me. There are some that may find that Jasmine moment in the third act empowering, some that may find it meaningful, and I'm not going to take that away from anyone, particularly young girls and women in the audience who see themselves in that character and who feel that that's a powerful moment for me. Looking at the storytelling just as a critic, that moment was one that rang a little hollow for me in the film. However, there are so many more, particularly with Jasmine's character, that did ring true, that it doesn't overwhelm the other stuff done in the film. So really, when I'm looking at Aladdin as a whole, 2019's Aladdin works as, I would say, a companion piece to the original, not a replacement, certainly not a new imagining. but a companion piece that is good enough and strong enough where it counts for me to recommend. I do think that Aladdin purists may have some issues with some of the changes, because there are some changes made to the film, to the story. They may have some issues with that. If you're looking for a slavish recreation of the original animated film, that's not exactly what you're getting. However, that was refreshing to me, because my problem with the remake of Beauty and the Beast that Disney did a couple years ago was that I felt it was too slavish to the original, that it didn't think outside the box enough. Aladdin largely splits the middle, adds some new elements, brings back the things that you love, has a few bumps in the road with the changes that they do make, but overall it's enough for me to recommend, but not a home run. Not every movie has to be a home run, though. What did you think of Aladdin? Did you like the changes that they made? Did you not like them? What do you think of Will Smith as the genie? I think he's a little bit underrated going in. I really enjoyed him. Once you see the movie, let me know in the comment section below. We always love to hear what you think. And as always, stay tuned here to Fandom Entertainment. We have reviews of the latest movies that are coming out both this weekend and in the weeks to come. This summer, the fall, the Christmas, the movies, they never stop giving. It's the gift that keeps giving. Thanks for watching my review of Aladdin. See you next time.